Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this candidate live stream. We go live with the New Jersey Libertarian candidates every Thursday at 6:30. Today is me running for District 24. My name is Lana Leguía, and we also have Kaplan, who is running for New Jersey Governor. Dustin Maggard, who is going to be running for, or is running for District 8, is going to be running a little bit late, but he'll join us a little bit later. And Bruno, um, lieutenant governor candidate, cannot make it today. So, how are you doing, Vic? How's your campaign?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lana, for asking. Planning to be in a number of events. There's going to be a forum next Thursday, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. And of course, there will be other events in the future as well.
And next week, instead of doing the live stream like we normally do, I think I'm going to have whoever's available outside of yourself to live stream that candidate forum, because they are going to have an option to watch it, so we can kind of comment as it goes. So yesterday we talked a lot about the violence that's been going on in the last week or 2 weeks. Lots of things happening, and we talked about more so not necessarily Charlie Kirk, but the response of people and our governments in response to what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I think it's kind of getting out of hand. Now, after we ended the live stream, somebody did ask a question, so we weren't able to answer it during the live stream. But you guys, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat, or you can email me or message me. I try to host and also look at my messages to see if anyone has any questions. But yesterday, someone asked, what is the libertarian position on Jimmy Kimmel being fired from his network show, and I responded in text, but just so everyone else can kind of hear our answer. Libertarians believe that private institutions, private businesses, individuals have the right to fire and hire as they see fit. They don't have to explain themselves. You can refuse service of anyone for any reason. Of course, if you're refusing service to someone or firing someone over racism or misogyny or something like that, there's going to be social repercussions for those decisions. For example, I would never spend my money at an organization or a business that is, outwardly racist, something like that. But they're legally allowed. That's their right to do that. Now, but we have to remember with these cable channels, these network channels, that they're not entirely private. In fact, they aren't. The FCC is a federal regulating authority, and they use the FCC to strong arm that network to fire Jimmy Kimmel over a joke, basically. And he's a comedian, he's a host. So I do think that was state overreach for sure in that case.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Lana. I definitely agree with you. It was definitely, I think it was overreach, but they do have, of course, a right to fire anyone they want. This also has to do with licensing, and clearly, the person that was appointed by President Trump does not want to see Jimmy Kimmel, hosting that show. So that certainly was a factor in what happened. So this was basically a political decision that was influenced by the position of the Trump administration regarding Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, President Trump did make it clear that he doesn't want to see Jimmy Kimmel hosting that show in the future. So it's no surprise when that an opportunity came up and Jimmy Kimmel said what he said. That was used as a justification to can him, due basically to the whole issue of licensing.
Yeah, and hashtag abolish the FCC, right? I mean, I don't think you need to ask permission from the government to do most things, but I don't think that someone needs to get a license to
No.
have a show or have a network. And so, yeah, that's very alarming. But what's also alarming is that Trump has announced that Antifa, which is not really anything as a domestic terrorist organization. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Vic?
Well, I certainly haven't seen them use much violence in the last. I haven't seen much violence coming from Antifa in the last 5 years, so I do think that's overblown, personally. That's. I mean, I don't remember in the last 5 years. I mean, since 2020, there's any kind of violence that got any kind of national attention that was attributed to Antifa. So I do think that this is overblown. I mean, I don't see Antifa causing violence right now and throughout the country, and so yeah, I definitely, well, obviously think I do think it's overblown. So
Well, my problem with it is how are they going to decide who is part of Antifa and who isn't? It's kind of like before they labeled it, before all this whole thing with Charlie Kirk happened, or actually right after, people were calling for leftists, quote unquote leftists, to be labeled a domestic terrorist organization. It's like it isn't an organization; it's just a label you put on people, and I feel like that's kind of what Antifa is. Some people claim to be part of Antifa, but it's not organized. It's not an organized group of people that meet and have lists and have well organized and orchestrated events that they do. And so, how are they going to determine who is part of Antifa and who isn't? And my fear with that is they're basically just going to arbitrarily decide who is Antifa, which, by the way, is short for anti-fascist, which a lot of us uh, I guess, would say that we're anti-fascist, maybe not part of Antifa, but again, it's not really an organized group of people. So how are you going? I want to know how they're going to decide who is and who isn't part of this terrorist organization. And my guess is that it's going to be one or a handful of people's decision, and it's going to be incredibly arbitrary.
no, I think you're right about that because you're right. There is no leader, so exactly how does one decide what who is and who isn't, and it's yeah, it definitely makes it a sort of a different case than some of the other groups that do have leaders, right? I think it's easier to well, I mean, they obviously would have to engage in activities that would consider to be terrorist. I think my point is that, I mean, you have a valid point, of course, but my issue also is that I haven't seen them doing anything that would fall under the definition of terrorism in the last I mean, all those years. So, I mean, if they're not engaged in violence and this isn't happening, so why label it as that type of organization? Like, I understand that there are other groups that do engage in violence, that whatever their activities are fall under that definition of terrorism, but doesn't seem like I certainly wouldn't consider Antifa to be that group. If it's not engaged in violence, and I don't see why it should be labeled that. And yeah, I would be very careful also to look at any domestic organizations, and that they may have a difference of opinion, and the organization may be sort of labeled as a terrorist organization that when it may not be terrorist at all. So one also has to look what these organizations actually do, and if they're actually labeled terrorist without any justification whatsoever. So I, that designation does carry with it certain consequences, and I'm just not going to, if a federal government decides to call this or that group terrorist, I would not going to assume that that's what that organization is. I would hope that people would look for the government to actually put evidence that would justify their labeling.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's just like over the last few years, especially like in 2020, during the riots, they were just kind of calling anyone Antifa. And so that's what my concern is. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm on several lists, some lists out there, and I'm no terrorist expert. I don't have any, deep knowledge or experience on how these matters work. But I would assume that for something to be an actual terrorist organization, they have to be organized to some degree, because how are you going to infiltrate it? How are you going to catch them, etc.? Um,
Sure. And
and
also, if I may add, I apologize if I may interrupt.
Mhm.
Apologize. Also, it does appear that some groups are taking off the terrorist list, certainly by our State Department, just based on pure politics, and not because they changed any of their behavior, even according to their own government, which is
Mhm.
for political reasons, like the Mujahid al-Haq, the organization, the Iranian organization, which is Marxist in origin, that had committed acts of violence, including targeting Americans, and was only removed from the terrorist list just because it opposes it opposes the government of Iran and supports overthrowing the government of Iran. And then so it was taken off the list of terrorist organizations, not because it actually changed their tactics, also because in the past as well, that organization contributed money to a number of Republicans and Democrats who have taken their money gladly while the organization was on a list of terrorist organizations, according to the State Department. So, it's pretty obvious that if us regular Americans were to engage in those types of activities, I'm sure that people would be arrested in no time. Yet you had former elected officials, both on the Republican and Democratic sides, taking money, prominent people as well, taking money from the one organization, gladly collecting money from them, and without any consequence whatsoever. So then, of course, what our federal government did, the State Department did, they ended up taking it off the list. Same goes with al-Nusra, the Syrian organization that is an affiliate of Al Qaeda. Certainly, nothing has changed regarding the the activities of the organization, except for then what ended up happening, of course, is their leader is now the leader of Syria. So now, of course, that organization was taken off the list of terrorist organizations. Like I said, all of these examples that I've listed show that clearly this is really more about politics than anything else.
Yes. Absolutely. So it looks like our viewership is jumping. So I just want to remind everybody that Dustin Maggard is going to be here soon. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And please share the live. I think someone shared it and we're getting more views. So if you have any questions, kind of help keep the conversation going. If you have questions for Vic or me or just about libertarianism, we'll try our best to answer them. But to your point, I remember when people were saying we should label MAGA as a terrorist organization, which again, they're not necessarily organized. There's no way to recruit MAGA members. They're just it's an ideology, or it's a group of people who support Trump basically. And so what, you're just going to arrest all Trump supporters? I also remember during 2020, or maybe shortly after, when the vaccine rolled out, people were saying that anyone who didn't want to take the vaccine was also a terrorist. I mean, people just want, I think people just, I don't know why they want the state to have that sort of authority to just, I don't know, knock down your door and arrest you because you have thoughts, and this is not far-fetched, right? It's not fantastical. It's not something that we read about. I remember when swatting was a thing, right? In the video game world, somebody, got into a tiff with somebody, so they would call a SWAT team, and they would literally be on live stream, and they would be coming in the door and jumping on these people. So that was a real thing that happened. It was really that easy to get the government knocking down people's doors. Is literally just a phone call. You could say the same thing about ICE. You make one phone call and somebody's business is now shut down for half a day because of a tip or anything like that. And so when we go around saying we think this person should be labeled, or this group of people or this ideology or whatever should be labeled a domestic terrorist organization, do people realize what that means, what you're asking the government to do, what power you're handing over to them? I'm not sure they do, or maybe they do and they just don't care, and they just think, well, it's not going to affect me, but it will. The regime will change to the other side for a while, and then you'll be on the receiving end of that state force. So
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with you, Lana. I just don't think people think about that. They don't think about what's going to happen next. The next president may be a Democrat, and then they'll of course, they won't be complaining how terrible the president is, but of course, at the same time, they have no issues with what is happening today, but they're just laying a groundwork for future events to happen that they would be upset about, unhappy about. But like I said, they have no issues about what's happening today. They want the state to be empowered with the ability to go after people they disagree with. But of course, as you said it correctly, they're ignoring the fact that they're also empowering the state to go after the people they will like and people they will support in the future. So, but that's I don't think they many people actually think about that on either side. So,
Right. So the other thing that is happening in regards to responding to Charlie Kirk is the Senate passed a resolution making a day of remembrance on Charlie Kirk's birthday, which is October 14th. So that's, a month away. Oh, did I freeze? Can you see me? Okay,
yeah,
we're good. And I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Actually, I do know how I feel about that. First, I think it's pretty not funny, but it's the same birthday as George Floyd. So some people are commenting about that. But what I would have preferred they did, instead of making a day of remembrance for Charlie Kirk, I wish they would have made it like a day of remembrance for the First Amendment, or your expression of that you have freedom of speech, you have freedom of expression. And unfortunately, somebody was assassinated expressing that. So I would have preferred it to be worded differently. I'm not sure that we need to, on a federal level, celebrate Charlie Kirk's birthday, and that needed to be brought to the Senate. I don't know. I just feel like I feel like all this is happening really fast and efficiently. It's like the government can move fast and efficiently when they really want to, and they don't with other things that are actually affecting our livelihoods. But they passed a resolution for Charlie Kirk Day, in record time. I don't know. It kind of irks me a little bit.
right. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, they really want to get something done. They certainly really, really want to get something done. They do it fast, for sure. And you could definitely see that after 9/11, the Patriot Act, right? I mean, a lot of this legislation gets done really quickly, gets done really fast whenever there's an event that's considered to be, a national tragedy or kind of a tragedy of any kind. You have legislation being done kind of right away, and that's also happens to be the case when sort of with people and who don't agree, they feel like they're being they're afraid to kind of voice their opinions, and they feel like stifled, and certainly saw that after 9/11. And so there was a rush to pass legislation that restricted civil liberties of the American people, and there was just this fear, that a lot of people had. If you say you don't agree, that somehow that makes you a bad person. And as time went on, of course, I think more people realized that what was done was, Congress rushed, back then to way too fast to pass this legislation, even without reading the Patriot Act that Congress voted for. And of course, they came up with the name Patriot to imply that, well, if you don't agree with this legislation, then you don't love this country somehow. So this was done for a reason, of course. What are you? You're not a patriot. You hate patriots, right? Like, what is wrong with you? You don't love America. And so this is. So I feel like I understand what you're saying. I mean, there are people who just don't agree with a number of things that he said, and they don't. And I think for those people, it's just certainly not going to make a whole lot of people comfortable who feel this way, because it's like there's a lot of things he said that they didn't agree with. They did, so it's not just they didn't agree with it. They number of people found those things offensive, and Barack Obama spoke about it. I know a few days ago, and he said it just like, okay, well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with that statement, this statement, and that statement. And so, there are a lot of people who feel this way. And the idea of kind of making his birthday into a day to honor him. Yes, there are people, plenty of people, millions of Americans who are just not going to agree with this. I think there's a difference between certainly Martin Luther King Jr. and him. And I know there are people making statements equating Charlie Kirk pretty much to one congressman compared him to one of the disciples of Jesus Christ. So I think that yes, of course there are plenty of people that are going to disagree with that. I just feel like if you're talking about unifying the country, right? Because we're so divided, and I spoke about this before. Honoring somebody that made statements that plenty of people found to be disagreeable. I just don't see how that's going to unify the country. I think your proposal is a lot more, I think, astute in terms of unifying people around an idea of the First Amendment, of freedom of speech, something that Charlie Kirk certainly did speak in favor of. So that to me sounds like an idea that would be more unifying in terms of the as far as the public is concerned.
Yeah, I also just think that, I don't know, asking the government to make a new holiday, it just in general is kind of a waste of time. It's not about Charlie Kirk or any of the other people that we feel we should honor. I mean, as communities, we can honor whoever we want at any point. Why do we need to have the Senate waste time voting on this to make it a federal day of remembrance? I don't know. I wish people would just stop going to the government and like do everything and solve everything, So Dustin is here. Hopefully he's ready.
Kind of.
Hi.
Hello.
So the last 2 days, Vic and I have been talking about kind of not necessarily Charlie Kirk, but just the response to Charlie Kirk and kind of this government overreach and these things that are happening in response to what happened. If you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, obviously a lot of people, there's been a lot of talk that we've come full circle. The horseshoe, the ends of the horseshoe have connected, and we're the people that were complaining 4 years ago are now doing the exact same sort of things that they were complaining about. We fully expect this, especially as libertarians. We know there's no difference. They all do the exact same thing. As far as Charlie goes, I think that he did have an impact, but I don't believe the level of canonization is quite necessary. And I believe that it's highly political. Obviously, it's just kind of riling a base. There's that, but as far as what the government's doing, it looks like the FCC kind of pressured some of these networks into, or at least the one network into removing the one late night show host, which is unacceptable. If they truly felt that he should not be on the air for whatever his remarks are, I don't even know what they are yet. Then obviously that's their right to do that. But it looks like the FCC may have done that, which is, that's completely unacceptable. The FCC's role is way too inflated as far as their control over what we can and can't get through public broadcasts. So and this just exemplifies that they shouldn't be able to pressure some network or some station, a radio station, TV network, whatever, into having excluding certain content or something like that. It's entirely up to them. They should have no say whatsoever. So
my understanding, what he said is that the reason why they're so mad is because they're claiming that he lied, and he implied that the assassin or the shooter was MAGA.
Right.
I believe we still actually don't know, and so I'm not going to really comment on whether it was or not. But they believe that to be like a blatant lie, and because of that, he doesn't deserve to be on the air. And so not only did they threaten that network to pull their licensing, which again it's a federal, a regulatory authority, so like that is federal pressure,
Right.
suppressing speech. But then they said, well, you can have your job back if you publicly apologize and donate to, I don't know, some sort of Charlie Kirk Foundation, or donate to his family or something like that. And then one other thing, then you can have your job back. And to me, that just sounds incredibly like authoritarian. Like, unless you apologize and act sincere about your apology about this guy that we're supporting on a federal level, then you can have your job back and you can keep your license to be a network. That just seems, I don't know why anybody would support that.
No, that's completely unacceptable. Again, you know, some would argue that the federal government does need to have some regulatory authority over the spectrum, I guess. But as far as what content is available there, no, and something like that's absolutely completely ridiculous. To my knowledge, he didn't necessarily, from what you've told me, it doesn't sound like he necessarily broke any rules that the FCC has. So this is just purely the administration using, again, one of their regulatory agencies to basically attack speech, and that's unacceptable. That's completely unacceptable. The idea that Americans are stupid and that we're unable to determine fact from fiction, and the government has to protect us is preposterous. That's completely ridiculous, and under no uncertain terms should they be allowed to censor in our best interest, because it's always in our best interest, whether it is or not. And that's it's unacceptable.
Yeah, and then we have, people in Congress wanting to pass bills that will pull funding, federal funding for schools, elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and I believe colleges, if they don't fire certain employees that have said. First, it started out as, if they were celebrating his murder, and now it's just like if they criticized him at all. Because I've read some of the statements of people being fired. That is also a form of government overreach, because these institutions are not private. They are public, which means that they are protected under the Constitution. So these institutions do have their First Amendment. We've had so many Supreme Court rulings over this, particularly in universities. Do people have freedom of speech in universities? Do professors have freedom of speech? And they do. We ruled on this over and over and over again. So to pull federal funding for these institutions because their employees are saying something they don't like, I think is ridiculous as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, that right there, this illustrates how dangerous it is to have the government funding things like particularly higher education, where there is a lot more discussion. In higher education, you get into some of these, you kind of dig deep a little bit, and you're going to start to hear you might be subjected to some things you don't necessarily want to hear, because that's kind of part of the deal. There's adults here. So, to say, well, we're going to pull the federal funding away unless you change the speech that you allow. That right there is the prime example of why that federal funding should have never been there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't, then it wouldn't matter. The government could sit there and beat on its chest all it wants, but they can't necessarily do anything to any of these colleges that are deciding on their own to allow a speaker to be there. We know Kirk himself sued a lot of colleges because they set up these free speech zones, and they would stick them somewhere where nobody could actually hear what he had to say. He was a champion of that. So now the government is now essentially doing the exact opposite of what it was that he worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's mind-blowing to me that this is happening now. This is literally the exact opposite. I don't believe that he would have supported this action. I don't think he would have. And I know what his position was on this, was that, that funding should not be there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
These free speech zones and these restrictions on speech, particularly on college campuses, should not be there. So it is kind of crazy to me. He would have, many would have considered him a bit of a watchdog of this. And the moment he's not here to watch what's going on, it immediately reverts back to exactly the sort of thing that he, that's the one thing that he definitely fought for, that no one can argue otherwise. It's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, go ahead, Vic. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the irony, of course, that he did argue that people should have a right to free speech, and then the moment he's gone, right? I mean, this is the response that people come up with, that say they love, they supported Charlie Kirk. They're big fans of his. Let's restrict free speech. Let's honor Charlie Kirk by restricting free speech, which is exactly what Charlie Kirk fought against. So yeah, no, this just makes no sense whatsoever.
No, I don't think it even made 24 hours before these actions started taking place, which is crazy. You'd think maybe it would creep back a little bit, but there was no creeping. It was literally immediately as soon as these sorts of things started happening, they were right on top of it to control speech on campuses.
Yeah, and I hope that people are kind of, especially the flip-flop from 2020 and who was being suppressed and who was being canceled, etc., according to who was in office. And then now it's literally flip-flopped the other direction, and they're doing the same things, using the same tactics, just from the other side of the opposition. But I hope people who are truly paying attention realize that this will continue to happen if you keep asking the government to save you for things. I was talking to a socialist about our definitions of freedom, and to me, at the core, is freedom to me means freedom from state intervention. The state, whether it's federal, state, or a local level, can't come to me and tell me how to live my life. And that applies to basically everything. But freedom to them meant that all their basic needs were taken care of, their housing, their medical care, etc. So they didn't have to worry about those things, and then they could do whatever they wanted with their free time, make art or do nothing or whatever. To them, that was freedom. And who's going to take care of your basic needs? Well, from the perspective of the socialists, the government, of course, right, the state. But they don't realize that when you ask the state to do that, you don't actually have freedom, because everything is fine until you dissent even a little bit, even in your thoughts, and then they have a problem, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lana. This, if you're giving to the state the power to do the things you like, you're also giving it the power to do the things you hate, and because you don't get to control that power. I think this is something that people fail to understand. Some people seem to believe that they're the state is some kind of a plaything, that they can control it. It's not, and that's one thing that they just fail to understand. They don't get to run the government. They don't get the government to make the decisions they want the government to make. It will never be them, because it will be the people who have the most money. They're the ones who are going to have the most power, and it will never be people like them. That's one thing they fail to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you put power, whenever power exists, there'll always be someone looking to exploit it. And in the case of government, or especially any kind of democracy where there is a majority that gets to make decisions, that majority will be the one to exploit it. And when you are the minority there, whether that's a minority party at the time, you're not in power, or a small group of individuals, or even the smallest minority yourself, you're going to be the biggest victim of that power when it's abused, and it will always be abused.
Yes, and that's why as libertarians we want smaller government, not because we want to do whatever we want and have like this anarchist chaos, but because as long as they exist, they're going to be controlling as much as they can. And I talk to people who genuinely believe that the government exists to help people, and it's really hard to convince them otherwise, right? Because they're not there to help you, and they were never designed there to help you and take care of you and give you food and shelter and medicine. That's not what they were there ever designed to be. So there's a lot of trust that people put in the government that is undeserving, and faith is the hardest thing to change in someone. If you have faith in your government, I wouldn't know how to change your mind in that, right? Just like faith in anything else.
Right. No, I absolutely agree, Lana. And if I could say, you're absolutely right. And because you can give all the examples of state intervention, how that leads to negative consequences, but then I'm sure the response would be that, well, then we just have to elect better people. Now, only if we elect better people that life would be so much better. If we elect the right person, but like I said before, they're not going to be the ones controlling those people. They're not going to be the ones running those policies. So that's where that misconception comes from.
Yeah. So, Dustin, you haven't
Mhm.
been on a live stream in a while, so if you want to talk about your campaign, or even the recall campaign, what's going on with that?
All right, we'll talk about the recall. I just got back. Fortunately, my work schedule has circled back around, so I'll be on the call hopefully a little bit more often. But so the recall is ongoing. We do have quite a few signatures. I haven't checked in with Vicky yet to see how many she's managed to get in the last week. I have been to most of the neighborhoods in town now. I still have one or two that I want to go out and visit. What's interesting is usually the first time I go out, we don't do particularly well, but you'll start seeing the cars slow down and see what's going on. And then the second time when you go back, that's when suddenly people start kind of coming out of nowhere to the sign. They realize, oh, the recalls in the neighborhood. I was just in way out in what we call Scrape Town. It's all the way out in the west end of town. They're very, very separated from everything else, very far away from all the commerce. It's just sort of a development that's out there, and a lot of people um, were aware that something is going on. They had heard about this mayor, but weren't sure exactly how to go about addressing him. A lot of people said, I've heard something. Nobody seems to like him, but nobody really had the full story. When I talk to people for 5 or 10 minutes, usually I'll walk up and they'll say, "Hey, are you here?" I'll ask them, "Are you here to sign the petition?" They'll say, "Oh, I don't know if I'm going to sign or not." Within 5 minutes, where do I put my name? As soon as they find out about this guy, it's actually pretty crazy how many don't know, considering the amount of media that's actually come out in the last year and a half about this guy and some of the stuff that he's done. It's kind of surprising, actually, how many people know there's something wrong with him, but aren't really aware. And then when they find out just how bad he is, they're telling, they sign immediately and they send 4 or 5 neighbors down. And, and what I found in just interacting with people and letting them know what, the truth, this is what's going on. It's very, dare I say, enraging to many of them. They had no idea. They just figured, oh, well, he's a bad politician. They're all over. We all know bad politicians are all over the news right now. And they just kind of discount as just another bad guy. And then they find out, no, this guy is particularly heinous, and he is my mayor.
Mm.
This guy's literally impacting my property taxes by his existence. His mere existence is costing you money. When you explain that to them, it's kind of a game changer. And there is a momentum where I think that it was kind of slowing down for a little bit since he has been in office for, I guess, about a year. So that's good. I'm glad to see that. And I'm hoping that through this recall, it kind of rekindles some engagement here in town, because the reason that someone like this gets elected is a lack of engagement. It's a lack of civic engagement. It's folks showing up to vote that don't really know who they're voting for, or people not showing up to vote at all, even if they are registered to vote, because, oh, well, it's just a mayor. I don't really care. He doesn't impact my, when the reality is this guy impacts your life more than any president. And explain I really hope this this next election, the recall election, obviously, but hopefully this next township level election has a really good turnout. I would like to see the turnout doubled or tripled, just by people realizing that something this bad happens when you don't get involved, and it shows exactly why it's important that we as voters take voting seriously and take our local elections seriously, perhaps even more so than national level.
Have you experienced like resistance or people being angry or kind of like protesting these events that you have signature gathering or anything like that?
So I haven't had anyone show up and tell me that they are opposed, which is not surprising. Now, what has happened? One of our committee members was petitioning at a little league event. There's quite a few people, and she's super nice. You know, she's not forceful or harassing or anything like that. She did approach someone, and this was, I believe, Saturday. I believe it was actually Saturday. She approached someone or whatever she's doing to get the signatures, and this person verbally attacked her. Um, you know, essentially saying that she's someone like her is the reason that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated, which is obviously not the case. It's the exact opposite, if anything.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I talked to her and had to kind of talk her down and explain to her, was like, unfortunately, this is the political climate that has been kind of curated in this country right now. Someone like this mayor should unite everyone, and the idea of recalling this guy, I mean, should have a fire under anyone. It should be a completely nonpartisan issue. Doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You should not want this person in office. You should want them removed immediately. And somebody coming and saying, "Hey, will you sign this recall petition?" Kind of getting someone to, the person that's approached, to get that angry to actually verbally assault, a petitioner. We're not asking for, ballot access for a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or anyone like that. We're looking to remove a scoundrel. Mm-hmm. It is kind of concerning, that level of, there's no politeness. It's like, no, thank you, and walk away isn't a thing anymore. You have to verbally assail someone because you assume that person must hold a different political position than you do. Which should not have even been the case here. This is purely politically neutral, if you will.
Yeah, I've actually seen over the years, just as just in the time that I've been doing this kind of stuff, that people are getting like more and more aggressive when it comes to even collecting signatures for candidates. And in the same way that people are elected into office, the people, quote unquote, the people have to vote them in. You can also vote them out. And so this idea is like, okay, he's horrible, it's just another politician, just let him, it's fine, just leave it alone. No, you have the power to fire them if they are not doing their job, or they're doing horrible things to their community, like this mayor is, Jack Tompkins. And it's interesting that he specifically said that, because I did hear about that. I thought that maybe he was just angry because he liked Jack Tompkins or something. I don't know. But the fact that he said that you're the reason why Charlie Kirk was assassinated is interesting, because Jack Thompson is a Republican. And I wonder if they think that attacking Republicans in any sense of the word is like, I don't know, condoning being violent towards them or something. I'm trying to figure out where his logic is in saying that.
Yeah, if I could interject. Mm-hmm. I do think that some of the rhetoric we've heard over the last week is that basically, well, this is what happens, right? This is the language that is being used, is that, well, all these Republicans were called all these different names, and that just creates a culture of hatred and then therefore, anyone that does anything against somebody, against a person from a from a particular political party, that somehow that just creates this atmosphere that has contributed to this to this event. This is actually, by the way, very similar, and both parties employ the Democrats and the Republicans, right? So when the when Bill Clinton was president, right? So when you had the Oklahoma City bombing take place on April 19th, 1995, Bill Clinton came out and said, well, this is the type of rhetoric, right? You had Republicans using this rhetoric, creating I don't believe he mentioned the Republicans by name, but then he's saying, well, you have all these people using all this anti-government rhetoric, and they just created this environment of hatred that contributed to the Oklahoma City bombing. So now you have, both sides use the same type of argument. So now, of course, you have Republicans using a similar argument that is anyone that was opposed to the Republicans used all kinds of names then to describe them, that they somehow contributed to this atmosphere, to this environment that led to the tragic event a week ago. So it's the same time.
Yeah, but because we talk about like hate, that leans towards like hate speech, and we talk about whether hate speech is actually inciting violence. Should it be illegal? Should it be all this stuff? And I can hate someone. I don't hate very many people, but I can hate someone and still not want to do harm to that person, right? Because that's who I am as a person. My hatred for someone doesn't mean I think that you deserve to have your life taken away from you. So at what point do we just hold people accountable for making decisions like that, like aggressing on someone or taking someone's life simply because you thought that they were a communist or they were a fascist or they were a terrible person or the world would be better without them, or whatever it is that whatever opinion you have of them doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to then be violent towards them. Like, it's not hate speech, it's the person making that decision, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's got to be individual responsibility. I mean, people have a right to call other people all kinds of names that people they disagree with. I mean, this is as American as apple pie. Now, I think some of the language has been sort of out there, but in terms of people who have done that, who have called other people names, and people have done it on both sides. I mean, it's not like see the way this is being portrayed right now is that like one side is pure, that like nobody on that one side ever called anyone on the other side any names, which is ridiculous. I've heard names like communist being used. I mean, come on, seriously. And then it's only people on the other side. They're the ones that are bad. They're the ones responsible for all this rhetoric and all this hatred. That somehow people on the other side, like they haven't called people on that side, people on the other side, all kinds of names. So this is ridiculous. Obviously, there's got to be individual responsibility. People have called each other all kinds of names on both sides. That has nothing to do with what happened a week ago. I mean, the idea that somehow they're responsible, of course not. I mean, that because two can play that game and one can come up with any type of example. We've seen violence where that one person who was a Bernie Sanders supporter who shut up a bunch of members of Congress. Of course, that doesn't make Bernie Sanders supporters responsible for what happened. That only makes that one individual responsible. And I think the sad part, what we see is that anytime this type of event happens, all of a sudden you have people on the one side blaming everyone on the other side for what happened, which is completely ridiculous. People have to take individual responsibility for their actions, and having a kind of a group guilt and sort of a guilt by association, that's something that people should not be using at all.
Yeah, I think that
Go ahead.
we've got to a point in this country where talking like that is now acceptable, right? And this wasn't the case, say, 10 years ago. Being that, talking in such a vile way was not the case 10 years ago. And we have a right, you have a right to get up on your soapbox and say all kinds of mean stuff and make yourself look like an asshole in public. And, that's supposed to be the case. Somebody sees someone talking that way, using this kind of language towards another human being, and is supposed to be able to look at it and go, you know what? I don't want anything to do with this person or their ideology, because they do not sound like a good person. They don't sound like a nice person to me. And we don't have that anymore. Now it's acceptable. We as a society think it's acceptable to talk like this. And of course, if you're into factions, your opposing faction is going to respond to your language in kind. So now we're at this point where we're just mudslinging and name calling, and there's no respectful discourse anymore, and that's what results in, that's what allows something like that to happen. That's what allows what happened to our committee member that was berated publicly for just asking if somebody wanted to sign a petition, to remove this mayor that has some fairly serious allegations that I can't think of anyone who would be on the defending side. That's where we're at. That needs to get cleaned up, and we need to really start policing ourselves, because not policing ourselves is giving the government the right to police us, or handing it over to the government. People are expecting the government to fix the problem that we've kind of created, and that's how we have Jimmy Kimmel getting pulled off the air at the behest of the FCC, because, oh, you can't talk like that, so we're going to use the government to make sure that you don't say those mean things anymore, when the reality is we really shouldn't say those mean things. It doesn't mean you don't have a right to. It means that it's socially unacceptable to talk like that, and talking like that will not put you in the good graces of the majority.
Yeah, and I hate playing the devil's advocate role, but I'm about to. So I brought up earlier that a couple of times, like swatting, or like when people call ICE, all it takes is one phone call for the government to be banging down your door, right? And we talk about people who use hate speech, and more than likely that person is not going to be able to go up to somebody that they claim to hate, a Muslim, a woman, or what, a leftist or whatever, and take their life. Most human beings are pretty incapable of doing that. However, those same people will be cheering on the state doing it. I know several people who have said to my face that Gaza needs to be flattened, every Palestinian is evil and needs to be murdered, and they're perfectly okay with our tax dollars and the people who are currently in the military doing that for them in the name of, right? And so when we talk about hate speech, and of course I would never support criminalizing hate speech because that's ridiculous, but hate speech is adding to that. So while the individual will probably never be able to do an act of violence in the name of their hate, they will ask the state to do it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, if I could add really quickly, and this is also a case where I think the national media, whether it's Fox, I mean, I'm going to mention the channels, but some of that hateful rhetoric is coming from them for sure. And people that watch that rhetoric, right? They hear the rhetoric, they see it on social media, they see it on television, on news networks, and they just copy them along. And so there's got to be responsibility. I don't think this is being done innocently. I think this is being the rhetoric is being pumped up on purpose. I really believe that, because honestly, I think the powers that be, they really do not want the people to unite. They really want people in each camp to hate each other, to use these sort of kind of red meat issues, divisive issues, to turn against each other, because the last thing they want to see is people uniting with each other and to go after the actual enemies. Those people are responsible for worsening our economy, for the destruction of the dollar, and all these other policies that have the lives of the American people more poor. And so the last thing they want to see them is unite. So then they do everything in their power to divide the people, and people just, like I said, they listen to the media and then they just copy them along. So instead of sort of finding common ground, as we've seen some of that before in previous decades, we don't see that anymore. Now it's not, it's more of that hate that, I don't agree with you. So instead of saying, as was the case before, we'll just happen to agree to disagree. Now it's more of, well, you're just a horrible, horrible person who wants to destroy this country. So I have no doubt that this is being done on purpose. But either way, I'd love to see that rhetoric to be toned down, and people try to talk to each other like some of that did take place when Obama was president, trying to see why, people, for example, disagree with the Affordable Health Care Act, or why they agree with it. But now it's much more challenging for people to have those discussions.
I agree.
Sorry, I just responded to the person who said hello, and it responded with like every single platform that is linked to this live stream for some reason. So now it says hello like 15 times. So we have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat, and we will answer it as best we can. And if we can't get to it, we'll just do it at the next live stream. We are going to go live again tomorrow at 6:30. But if you guys, Vic and Dustin, if you have anything that you want to kind of promote for your campaigns, you can do it now.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Lana. Yeah. So absolutely. Please visit my website, vic4liberty.com. That's vic4liberty.com. Visit. Definitely looking for volunteers, donations for my campaign, so I can spread the message of liberty to as many people as possible. Certainly, please visit Lana Leguia's website at lanaleguia.com, and please do the same also with Dustin Maggard, who's running for state assembly. Both Lana and Dustin running for the lower house of the legislature for state assembly. So please visit our websites and volunteer and donate, so we can spread that message of liberty to as many people as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll say if you can help at all, anything helps right now. We would like to try to get some ads in the here for this recall. Recalltompkins.com, and there is a donate link there. Even $5 extremely well allocated as far as like printing supplies, get some more signs out there, and the big thing right now is that ad in the newspaper, and as well as we're about to do a mass mailing. So that kind of stuff isn't cheap. We need to put it into perspective. It isn't cheap, but it's not super expensive. So the mass mailing is going to be about $80. So if we could get together that $80 to get that out, that would be super. So don't think that sending a small amount of money won't make a difference. It will make a huge difference.
All right.
Sorry, I was trying. My computer is starting to get a little slow. I think because it's raining outside. I'm also going to plug in the NJLP. If you are a registered libertarian in New Jersey, that doesn't mean that you're a member of the party. Being a member of the party is only $20. You do not, and if you're not a registered libertarian and you're a registered Democrat or Republican, you can still be a member of the Libertarian Party of New Jersey. You don't have to change affiliation, your voting affiliation to be a member. And what happens when you're a member is that $20 goes towards funding campaigns like this and promoting libertarians in the state. And you'd be surprised of how much money some of this stuff is, as Dustin said, like just printing things out. Printing a package for $1 or mailer, like a stamp is 80 cents now for some reason, and that doesn't include the envelope and the printing, whatever you're putting inside, and the address, and then the volunteer power that is needed to actually mail these things out. There's so much that is behind the scenes of a political party that $20 will help with that. But even if you're want to be a member, you can also, when you're a member, you can have voting rights to nominate candidates in the future. A lot of people like that. We don't have official primaries because we're not a recognized party, but we do have, I guess, kind of internal primaries. This year we had actually 4 candidates that were interested in governor, and Vic won that nomination. So if you're interested in helping select libertarian candidates in the future, you can become a member and have those voting rights. If you live outside of New Jersey, you can still be a member of the New Jersey Libertarian Party and support it. You just won't have voting rights if you reside outside the state. So anyways, so we are at the end. We're going to go live again tomorrow at 6:30 if you guys are available. And if you want to send any questions in, you can email me or message me, and we will answer them at the next live stream. So everybody have a good night.
You.
I